there's something about silence. Most people think it means distance, absence, maybe even the end of something, but with you, it feels different, my love. Even when you say nothing, I still feel you, in the quiet moments, in the spaces between words, in the way your presence lingers even when you're far away. It's like your soul speaks in a language no one else understands. And somehow, my heart listens. I don't need long conversations or perfect words, because with you, even silence feels full of meaning, full of emotion, full of us. And maybe that's what love really is. Not just what we say, but what we feel. Even when nothing is said at all, my love. There's a quiet kind of connection that doesn't need to be explained. And I didn't understand it before you. I used to think love had to be loud to be real, that it needed constant words, reassurances, conversations that never seemed to end. I thought if someone truly cared, they would always say it, always prove it in ways that could be heard, seen, touched. But then you came into my life, and everything I believed about love began to change in the most gentle, such unexpected way, because with you, silence isn't empty. It's not cold. It's not distant. It's not something that makes me question where I stand in your heart. With you, silence feels alive. It feels like standing in a room filled with something invisible but undeniable. Something that wraps around me without asking. Something that stays even when there are no words left to speak. My love, I feel you even when you say nothing, and it's not something I can easily explain. It's something I just know. It's in the way your energy shifts when you're near me. In the way my heart slows down without even realizing why. It's in the pauses. The small, quiet moments where the world seems to fade away, and somehow, without speaking, we understand each other. There are times when you look at me, and you don't say a single word. But it feels like you've told me everything. Your eyes hold stories, emotions, truths that don't need to be translated into sentences. And in those moments, I realize that love isn't always about what we say. Sometimes, it's about what we feel when there's nothing being said at all. I've learned that words, as powerful as they are, can sometimes fall short. They can be misunderstood, misused, or even lost in translation. But what I feel with you, that quiet connection, it doesn't get lost. It doesn't get confused. It just exists, steady and real. My love, there are moments when we sit together, and the world around us keeps moving, people talking, time passing, life continuing as it always does. But in our little space, there's a stillness, a calm that doesn't need to be filled, a peace that doesn't demand attention, and in that stillness, I feel closer to you than I ever have through words. It's strange, isn't it, how silence, something people fear, something people try to avoid, becomes the very thing that brings me closer to you, because when you're silent, I don't feel shut out, I feel invited, into something deeper. I feel like I'm seeing a part of you that the world doesn't always get to see, a part that doesn't perform, doesn't explain, doesn't try to be understood, and somehow, I understand it anyway. Maybe love isn't about filling every silence with noise, maybe it's about finding someone whose silence feels like home. And, with you, that's exactly what it feels like, home, a place where I don't have to guess, don't have to chase, don't have to question whether I matter or not, because even in your quiet, I feel chosen, I feel seen, in a way that doesn't rely on words, and that kind of feeling, it stays. My love, there are nights when we're apart, and the distance stretches between us like an endless road. No calls, no messages, just silence, and yet, somehow, I still feel you. I feel you in the way my thoughts drift back to you without effort. In the way your presence lingers in the quiet corners of my mind. It's like you've left a part of yourself with me. Something invisible, but constant, and even though you're not there, you are in the silence. You are. There's a comfort in knowing that what we have doesn't disappear when the conversation ends. It doesn't fade when the noise of the world takes over. It stays, quietly, patiently, like something that doesn't need attention to survive, and maybe that's what makes it real, because real things don't always demand to be noticed, they just exist, strong enough to remain, even in silence. My love, I used to be afraid of quiet moments. I used to think silence meant something was wrong, that it was a sign of distance, or worse, a sign of losing something important. But with you, I've learned that silence can mean something else entirely. It can mean comfort, it can mean trust, it can mean that we don't need to constantly prove what we already feel, because when love is real, it doesn't panic in silence. it rests in it, and I find myself resting in you. Even when you say nothing at all, there's a certain kind of honesty in silence. A kind that words sometimes can't carry, because when there are no words, there's nothing to hide behind, nothing to filter, nothing to adjust, it's just you, as you are, and somehow, that's when I feel you the most, not in the long conversations, not in the perfectly chosen words, but in the quiet moments where everything slows down, and all that's left is what's real. My love. Your silence speaks to me in ways I never expected. It tells me when you're tired, when you're thinking, when you're feeling something too deep to put into words. It tells me when you just need space, not because you're pulling away, but because you're holding something inside that doesn't need to be shared out loud. And I don't feel pushed away by that. I feel trusted, because you don't have to explain yourself to me. You don't have to turn every feeling into a sentence. You can just be. And I'll still be here. Feeling you. Understanding you. Even when nothing is said, there's a kind of closeness that grows in silence, a kind that doesn't rush, doesn't force itself into existence. It builds slowly, quietly, like something that knows it has time. And with you, I feel that kind of closeness, the kind that doesn't need to be constantly reminded that it exists, because it never disappears. My love, I don't need you to always say, I love you, for me to know that you do. I don't need constant reassurance, or endless conversations, because I feel it, in the quiet, in the way you stay, even when there's nothing left to say, in the way your presence doesn't fade, even when your voice is absent, in the way your silence still carries something warm, something real, something that reaches me without trying, and maybe that's what makes this so rare. So different from anything I've ever known before. Because this isn't about words. It's about connection, a connection that doesn't rely on sound, doesn't depend on explanations, doesn't need to be constantly expressed to be real, it just is, and I feel it. Every time the world goes quiet, every time you say nothing, but somehow, I hear everything. My love, there's a kind of peace that comes from knowing someone so deeply, that even their silence feels familiar. Like a melody you've heard so many times. You don't need the music to recognize it anymore. That's what your silence feels like to me. Familiar, comforting, safe. And in a world that's always loud, always moving, always demanding more, that kind of quiet connection feels like something rare, something worth holding on to, because not everyone will understand it. Not everyone will believe that silence can carry so much meaning, so much emotion, so much love, but I do, because I feel you, even when you say nothing. My love, there is something almost unexplainable about feeling someone without hearing them. Something quiet, yet powerful enough to stay with you long after the moment has passed. I didn't always believe in this kind of connection. I used to think that presence meant proximity, that to feel someone, they had to be close. Speaking, reaching out, reminding you that they were there. I thought love needed constant expression. That silence created distance, but then you came into my life, and everything I thought I understood began to shift, because with you, I've learned that presence isn't always about being seen or heard. Sometimes, it's about being felt. My love, I feel you even when there are no messages, no calls, no words filling the space between us, and somehow, instead of feeling alone, I feel closer to you. It's in the way your energy lingers, like something that refuses to fade. Even when you're not near me, even when the world goes quiet, there's still a part of you that stays, and I don't chase it. I don't question it. Maybe just feel it. There are moments when I sit in complete silence. No distractions, no noise, just my thoughts, and somehow, in that stillness, you appear. Not physically, not in a way I can explain to anyone else, but in a way that feels real enough to touch something inside me. It's like your presence has found a place within me. A place where distance doesn't matter, where words aren't needed. And maybe that's what makes this so different, so rare, because most people rely on what they can hear, what they can see, what they can hold on to, but what we have goes beyond that. My love, I don't need constant reminders that you care. I don't need you to fill every silence just to prove that you're still here, because even in your absence, I feel your presence. And that feeling, it doesn't disappear. It doesn't fade with time or distance. It doesn't weaken when the world gets busy. It stays, steady, quiet, but strong. There's something deeply comforting about knowing that what we have isn't fragile, that it doesn't break just because we're not speaking every moment of the day, because real connection, real love, doesn't depend on constant noise, it lives in something deeper. And with you, I've found that depth. My love, there are nights when everything feels still, when the world seems to slow down just enough for me to notice what's really there, and in those moments, I feel you the most, not because you said something, not because you reached out, but because your presence exists in a way that doesn't need to announce itself. It's like a quiet warmth, something that wraps around my thoughts, something that reminds me that I'm not alone, even when I'm by myself, and that kind of feeling, it's hard to explain to anyone who hasn't experienced it, because it's not loud, it's not obvious, it's not something you can point to and say, there it is. It's something you just know, something you just feel. My love, there's a difference between being alone and feeling alone, and with you, I've realized that those two things are not the same, because even when I'm alone, I don't feel empty, I don't feel like something is missing, I feel connected to you in a way that doesn't rely on presence in the physical sense, but something much deeper. Something that exists beyond what we can see or hear, and maybe that's what makes this so meaningful, because it's not dependent on circumstances, it's not limited by distance, or time, or silence, it just is. My love, I don't think people talk enough about this kind of connection, the kind that doesn't need constant validation, the kind that doesn't panic in silence, the kind that trusts, without needing proof every second, because what we have feels like that. It feels like something that doesn't need to be forced. Something that doesn't need to be explained, something that simply exists, because it's real. There are times when I wonder if you feel it too. If in your quiet moments, when everything slows down, you sense me the same way I sense you, not in a loud or overwhelming way, but in a calm, steady presence that stays with you, because if you do, then maybe you understand this the same way I do. Maybe you know that what we share isn't just about conversations or time spent together. Maybe you know that it's something deeper, something that doesn't disappear when the noise fades. My love, I've come to understand that words are just one way of expressing something. But they're not the only way. Sometimes, the most honest feelings don't come with words at all. They come in silence, in presence, in the way someone exists in your world without needing to constantly remind you. And you exist in mine like that, quietly, but completely. There's a certain kind of strength in a connection that can survive silence. A kind of trust that doesn't need to be constantly reassured. Because when you feel someone even in their absence, it means what you have isn't dependent on external things, it's something internal, something rooted deeper than anything temporary. And that's what I feel with you. Something rooted, something steady, something that doesn't disappear just because the moment changes. My love, I don't need to hear your voice every second to know you're there. I don't need constant words to feel close to you, because closeness, real closeness, isn't about how often we speak, it's about how deeply we feel each other, even in the quiet. And with you, that feeling is always there, set soft but constant, quiet but undeniable. It's in the way your presence lingers in my thoughts, in the way your energy feels familiar, like something that belongs. And maybe that's what this really is, not just love in the way people usually describe it, but something deeper, something that doesn't need to be loud to be real, something that doesn't fade in silence, but becomes even clearer in it. My love, even when you say nothing, I still feel you. And somehow, that means more than any words ever could. My love, there's something about us that doesn't follow the usual rules, something that doesn't need to be explained to exist. Most people search for clarity in words. They want everything to be spoken, defined, labeled, as if love only becomes real when it's constantly confirmed. But what I feel with you, it doesn't need that, it breathes on its own, it lives in the spaces where nothing is said. And yet everything is understood. My love, there are moments when I try to put it into words, to explain what it is about you, about us, that feels so different, but every time I try, the words fall short, because how do you explain something that isn't just heard, but felt? How do you describe a connection that exists even in silence, even in distance, even in the absence of everything people usually depend on? You don't. You just accept it. And that's what I've learned to do with you, to stop trying to define it, and just feel it. There's a certain kind of comfort in knowing that I don't have to chase your attention or fill every moment with conversation just to keep us alive. Because what we have doesn't depend on that. It doesn't fade when things get quiet. If anything, it becomes clearer, stronger, more real. My love, there's a difference between noise and meaning. Noises is everywhere, people talking, explaining, trying to prove things. But meaning, real meaning, doesn't always come with a sound. Sometimes it comes in a look, in a pause, in a moment where nothing is said, but everything is understood. And with you, I've learned to recognize that meaning. I've learned to listen, not just to your words, but to your silence, because your silence isn't empty. It carries something honest, something unfiltered, something real. And I don't feel lost in it. I feel closer to you in it. There are moments when the world feels overwhelming, loud, demanding, like everything is asking for attention all at once, and then there's you. Not saying anything, not trying to compete with the noise. Just being there, and somehow, that quiet presence becomes the loudest thing in my heart. It calms me, centers me, reminds me that not everything needs to be chased or explained. Some things are meant to be felt. My love, I don't think you realize how rare that is, to feel someone without effort, to know they're there, without needing constant proof, to trust a connection, even when it's quiet. Because in a world where people often confuse attention with love, what we have feels different. It feels deeper. It feels like something that isn't trying to impress, or convince, or prove anything. It just exists. Naturally. Honestly. And that's why it stays. There's something incredibly beautiful about a connection that doesn't demand to be understood by everyone else, because it's not for everyone else. It's ours. Something private, something quiet, something that doesn't lose its meaning just because it isn't always spoken out loud. My love, I've realized that the strongest feelings aren't always the ones that are expressed the most. Sometimes, they're the ones that are simply there, constant, steady, unshaken by silence. And that's what you are to me, a constant feeling, a quiet presence that doesn't disappear, a connection that doesn't weaken when words fade. And I don't need to question it, because I feel it, every time things go quiet, every time the world slows down, every time there's nothing left to say. You're still there, not in a way that needs to be proven, but in a way that just is. My love, maybe that's what makes this so special, not the words we say, but the way we exist in each other's world, even when we don't say anything at all, the way your presence stays with me. Even in silence, the way I can feel you, without needing to hear you, and the way that feeling never leaves.